Brought to you by WikiVidi.com. Linn LM-1. The Linn LM-1 drum computer manufactured by Linn Electronics Inc. was the first drum machine to use digital samples of acoustic drums, and was conceived and designed by Roger Linn. It was also one of the first programmable drum machines. It was introduced in early 1980, at a list price of $4,995 and climbed to $5,500 when additional features were incorporated. The price then fell to $4,995 as cost-cutting measures were introduced and later reduced to $3,995 before it was discontinued after the release of its successor, the LinnDrum. Somewhere between 500 and 725 units were built. It is prized by amateur and professional musicians alike for its rarity as well as its characteristic sounds, which can be heard on the recordings of artists including Prince, Herbie Hancock, Michael Jackson, The Human League, Peter Gabriel, Kraftwerk, and many others during the 1980s. History. Roger Linn was a professional guitarist in California in 1978 when he began to develop the LM-1 as an accompaniment tool for his home studio. He had experimented with many of the preset rhythm boxes which were popular at the time, but was dissatisfied and wanted a drum machine that did more than play preset samba patterns and didn't sound like crickets. Having learned how to program in BASIC and assembly language, Linn set to work on a computer program which could play user-programmed rhythm patterns, as well as chain them together to form a song. According to Linn, the first to suggest the idea of digital samples was Steve Porcaro of Toto. The drum sound samples were created by Linn and Art Wood, a Los Angeles session drummer, who also played drums with Cher, Bette Midler, Tina Turner, Gary Wright, Peter Frampton, James Brown, and others, as well as on numerous movies and television shows. Linn achieved his sounds by using a chip built into the machine which converted the digital samples into analog audio. His first prototype, manufactured at some time during 1979, was a cardboard box which contained the electronic components of the drum machine. Supposedly, Linn brought this prototype to parties and jobs and marketed it to fellow musicians, including Peter Gabriel, the members of Fleetwood Mac, and Stevie Wonder, who bought one of the first units. In total, somewhere between 500 and 725 units were built and sold between 1980 and 1983 when the LM-1's successor, the LinnDrum, was released. The first 35 units were assembled in Linn's home before manufacturing and distribution was taken over by 360 systems run by Bob Easton. The first 10 of these 35 units have distinctive features, as described below. Features. The LM-1 featured 12 8-bit 28 kHz samples, kick, snare, hi-hat, cabassa, tambourine, 2 toms, 2 congas, cowbell, claves, and hand claps, but no rider crash cymbals. The LM-1's many features set it apart from other drum machines of its time, most of which could only play a limited selection of preset rhythms. One of its most prominent features was its programmability. Although the Linn LM-1 was not the first programmable drum machine, it was the first to use digital samples and gained widespread popularity among professionals. The LM-1 also introduced a shuffle feature that enabled users to program swing notes into their rhythms. With a 96 ppqn maximum resolution, the LM-1 offered 6 percentage levels between fully straight beats and regular swing time feels. Although this feature has often been imitated, the Linn Shuffle has widely been recognized as the best and most natural sounding, and is present on every device Linn designed, including the Akai MPC series. The LM-1 included a built-in 13-channel mixer as well as individual output jacks. This enabled Linn's machine to integrate with existing recording equipment in a way that had previously not been possible for a drum machine. Unlike the later LinnDrum, the LM-1 also had individual tuning pots for each voice, resulting in many famous users expressing their preference for the LM-1 long after the LinnDrum was introduced. Unlike its younger brother, the LM-1 lacked crash and ride cymbal sounds, and the drum sounds could not be triggered by MIDI or trigger inputs. Nevertheless, the LM-1's sounds are very punchy and prominent. There are notable differences between the various LM-1 revisions. The Rev. 1 LM-1 is recognizable by its engraved buttons and lack of shuffle and autocorrect LEDs. The drum buttons were engraved with a small symbol of the drum it represented. These buttons were later discontinued because they were too expensive to manufacture. Internally it was different as well. It had single chips for the kick, tom and conga sounds and double chips for the clap. The Rev. 1 LM-1s did not have the filter on the kick, toms and congas that Rev. 2 and later machines had. As a result, it didn't sound as nice as the Rev. 2 and later machines, but the toms and congas could be played simultaneously. In the Rev. 1 LM-1s, the first 10 have no serial numbers or pre-printed adhesive-backed manufacturer's label on the rear panel, have a single molded metal frame for the front, bottom and rear panels, have higher quality mixer pots, have 2 knobs for tempo control and a screen-printed Linn and Moffat electronics instead of Linn Electronics on the lower right front of the chassis beneath the drum buttons. There are other minor mechanical differences too. The Rev. 2 LM-1 introduced 2 rows of LEDs to indicate the shuffle and autocorrect settings, several additional buttons on the front panel to aid in programming, and a shared filter on the toms and congas as well as the kick drum. There were a handful of Rev. 2 LM-1s with both engraved buttons and shuffle and autocorrect LEDs, but these are extremely rare. To cut costs on later Rev. 2s, the engraved buttons were replaced with unlabeled buttons. In lieu of the engraved names or symbols, the button names were printed on the front panel. The Rev. 3 LM-1 introduced more cost-cutting measures, including, on later Rev. 3s, the raised buttons were replaced by sealed buttons that were impossible to clean. In fact, the LM-1 service notes indicated these buttons had to be replaced if they went bad. Influence. Because of the Linn LM-1's versatility, it superseded its intended purpose as an accompaniment tool, and became a fully fledged rhythm section for many synthpop and progressive acts. Along with the Roland TR-808, which was released around the same time, it is widely credited with legitimizing drum machines, which, with a few notable exceptions, had previously largely been considered toys by most professional mainstream musicians. It was thought for a time that the LM-1 would put every session drummer in Los Angeles out of business, and caused enough of a stir that many leading session drummers went out and purchased their own drum machines and offered programming services. Herbie Hancock's Mr. Hands album featuring the track Textures was released in September 1980, and is possibly the earliest known commercial release to feature the device. The first song featuring an LM-1 to hit #1 on the UK pop chart was The Human League's Don't You Want Me in late 1981. It is also the first LM-1 track to top the US Billboard Hot 100, spending 4 weeks there in July 1982. In some ways, the most important and lasting of the LM-1's various features is its sounds, which remain powerful and characteristic, and a familiar staple of 1980s pop music. Linn acknowledged that his lack of audio engineering know-how may have contributed to his drum machine's unique sound. Many of the samples contain playback frequencies above the Nyquist frequency, which, although it results in aliasing under normal circumstances, contributes much to the sizzle of the LM1's sound. The successor. Linn introduced the successor to his revolutionary machine in 1982. The LinnDrum, often erroneously called the LM2, contained more sounds, more options for programming sounds, and 5 programmable trigger inputs, but was a step back from the LM1 in that it removed the ability to tune all of the individual drum sounds. It retailed for $2,500 less than the original LM1. And although it added some additional features, the cost-cutting measures were quite notable. Although the LinnDrum helped make electronic drums more affordable for the common musician, it is still not as revered as the LM1 and generally can be found on the used market for much less. Brought to you by WikiVidi.com. Would you like to know more?